Tom Cruise unexpectedly saved the movie theater in 2022 with Top Gun Maverick, and ever since then, he's become something more than an action flick movie star. Tom Cruise has become an icon of our post-cynical vibe shift.
Having any fun yet?
Thanks for listening and following along here on Deep Talks. I am Paul Anleitner. I want to invite you to subscribe to my brand new weekly newsletter called Reading the Zeitgeist. I have just submitted my manuscript for my forthcoming book to my publisher, and it's going through the editing process, and that's coming out in 2026. And leading up to that, I'm going to be posting weekly insights to help you understand what is happening in the cultural moment, to teach you how to read the zeitgeist. Zeitgeist is a German word meaning spirit of the age, and every age has its unique spirit. If that sort of language freaks you out, you could think of school spirit, right? All of you, when you went to high school or college, you had a taste of school spirit. If you had a good football team, a good basketball team, and you went to the Pet Fest, you felt that good that school spirit. It was a particular mood that seemed to permeate the building. If the next year all the seniors graduated and they went off to college, and then your football team went 0-16 or your basketball team was terrible, you felt that school spirit shift. And the same thing happens in culture. There are spiritual shifts that are happening all the time, and I want to help you read them, make sense of them, and be able to figure out how you can better build your life inside of a true story. So I invite you, click the link in the description below to subscribe to my weekly, and it's free, my weekly newsletter entitled Reading the Zeitgeist. So what's going on here with Tom Cruise? He was a cultural icon in the 80s. He captured our imaginations, those of us that were alive back in the 80s. I was very, very young, but he was a cultural icon in the 80s. High octane sincerity. He is something that is a bit of a cultural anomaly, in that he enjoyed a lot of success in the 80s and in the 90s. As we moved into the aughts and 2010s, there was the cultural mood had shifted in such a way. And of course, some of this was of his own doing, in his connection to Scientology. He had some peculiar interviews. But I also think Cruise's kind of ebb and flow here in culture of being a top movie star and then going through a period of maybe malaise, if not decline, and then this sudden resurrection is a signal of some of the value shifts that we have experienced. After Top Gun Maverick came back, gave us a sequel to the 80s cult classic Top Gun, it won over not just audiences with people going back to the theaters for repeated viewing, it also won over critics in a way that was really unique. Especially unique when we consider the era of deconstruction, of subverting our traditional values and stories that we've endured in culture for the last couple of decades. The stuff I've been talking about for a couple of years now on this program. Tom Cruise, after coming out of the success of Top Gun Maverick, announced he was going to do 2 final installments in the Mission Impossible series. And those movies are fun. For my money, I'll take Mission Impossible over the Bond series. I don't know. Maybe those of you watching and listening in the UK will be upset with that, but I just think top to bottom, those movies have been better. I think even from a moral standpoint, from a presentation of an archetypal hero that has moral virtues that we can aspire to. I wouldn't necessarily say Ethan Hunt is like Superman. He's certainly no Jesus, but he represents something that by and large part has not been as troublesome as the Bond character over the years. Now, the Mission Impossible movies have been fun, and the death-defying stunts are incredible, but I think what is going on with Tom Cruise is more than just people being enamored with his stunts. It's something much deeper than that. I think it's his relentless positivity, the way he earnestly celebrates other films, and this unapologetic try-hard demeanor, which feels like It is a recovery of something that we've lost since our culture has moved into this age of ironic detachment, this age of kind of pop culture postmodernism. Tom Cruise, in this new cultural pivot, in this vibe shift, has become an icon of what it means to be unapologetically aspirational in a post-cynical age. He never does the Ryan Reynolds thing, which I don't mean this as a knock towards Ryan Reynolds. It's just Reynolds' style of comedy is typical of the postmodern shift that happened in culture. It's the winking at the camera. It's the breaking the fourth wall. It's the way that you kind of signal to the audience that you're detached enough to not really feel like you're sincerely caring. He is none of those things. He is relentlessly sincere. But that kind of relentless sincerity, that aspirational sincerity, it fell out of fashion for decades and is only now starting to be recovered as we sift through the rubble of all we deconstructed in culture to go looking for the values that we go, these values we needed to retain. Yes, there was some value to deconstruction, although I'd prefer to think of the real value being reform as we remodel instead of just tearing down. We remodel with a higher vision of the good in mind. Even acknowledging that there were things about our past guiding stories and the values that we had in American culture that deserve to be critiqued. What we're doing right now is sifting through the rubble, trying to figure out what values do we want to recover and rebuild from. In the 80s and 90s, Cruise was that golden boy of the American modernist story, what I'm calling in my forthcoming book, The Modern Story. His characters, whether they were in Top Gun, Days of Thunder, A Few Good Men, they embodied the values of the modern story. Self-made success, clear and obvious universal moral categories that everybody should agree upon, the celebration of an upward trajectory in life and meritocracy. He was the personification of American meritocracy. But by the late 90s, the cultural winds had shifted, and postmodernism, with its suspicion of overarching narratives, its allergic reaction to sincerity, it dominated the zeitgeist. Earnestness was out. It was embarrassing. It was a signal that you believed you were in the right story, and you cannot signal that within the postmodern ethos. There is no right story. All stories are a play for power. So to signal sincerity, to signal that you believed something in this story was worth pursuing, was in that era a way of exposing your naivete. It signaled that you just didn't understand that this is all just about power and who has it. Aspirational action stars who set out to slay dragons and save princesses were replaced with nihilistic commentary, with ironic social commentary. And Cruise, during this time, he felt a little bit like a man without a country. He, of course, had this strange detour through Scientology. I don't know where he is at. Maybe he's had some interviews reflecting on his attachment to that cult. It was certainly a strange era. Maybe he's detached. I don't know. Maybe he's involved with it. I don't know. He had some, erratic interviews. The Oprah interview was often memed, and Gift comes to mind. And so he had some maybe own personal movement into less than aspirational behavior. And then he also did some experimental roles. And I see that as him trying to move and fit in as a movie star within that cultural moment. I think of Vanilla Sky, Magnolia, Eyes Wide Shut. And, you can have opinions about those movies and the quality of those movies, but they're very different than what he was portraying in Days of Thunder, what he was portraying in Top Gun, and what he seems to be, again, portraying once again in not only a Top Gun Maverick, but the new Mission Impossible movies. Even as we get into the 2000s and the 2010s, yes, he continued to pump out Mission Impossible sequels. And those were fine movies. They were great. But they still didn't carry this cultural impact that we're seeing today. He seemed like a person that was stuck in this cultural no man's land, didn't quite have a place to fit in. He had that, interesting, a lot of people found it funny, that interesting role he played in Tropic Thunder. It was, again, really cynical. Maybe it showed a range of his acting that hadn't typically been portrayed in this kind of particular style of parody comedy, but it was very, very different. Then came the metamodern moment. This is this unique cultural shift I've been talking about for the last few years that it's not just throwing out irony, it's not throwing out the things that we did learn in the postmodern era, but it repositions and reframes, and it seeks to not just discard everything that we had before postmodernism, but it seeks to find a way of synthesizing, of rummaging through the rubble and going, what do we want to hold on to? Maybe there are some things that we learned in the postmodern era that we want to hold on to as well. Is there a way of synthesizing that? The ultimate goal, I believe, that's moving us beyond, not deleting postmodernism, but moving us beyond postmodernism, has been our meaning crisis. The crisis of meaning, where once we have deconstructed all of our guiding stories and we tell people, all stories mask a play for power, what we're left with is a lack of a positive story to build back into. And so what I have seen in this postmodern, meta-modern moment is this shift away from the kind of question postmodernism was asking, which was, can you believe in anything at all, to this meta-modern reply, well, we have to try, right? We can't just live with disbelief. We can't just live with seeing through things. We have to see too. We have to attempt to build. We have to try to live in some direction. And that sort of ethos is what I see as Cruise's natural habitat. Few actors, especially when it comes to big box office popcorn films, commit as fully, not just physically, but emotionally, to sincerity. He's never winking at the audience. He'll jump off cliffs for them. He's not insulting their intelligence. He's not asking them to deconstruct the past or to, critically re-examine the values of their grandparents or their parents. He's not doing that. He is doing something that is actually refreshing to try to recover. We have CGI, what we could call CGI disembodiment everywhere. That's the norm. And, if you're a CGI artist, that's no slight to you. I think CGI can do things in stories that unlock our imagination in really, really powerful ways. There is a way in which we all do feel a degree of like oversaturation with CGI. And it's because CGI feels disembodied. It feels less than tangible, tactile. And this is where Cruise does something pretty incredible. He has committed himself to being primarily analog in this digital age. He's showing up by throwing his body off of cliffs on motorcycles and dangling off of the wings of biplanes. Obviously, there is a CGI component there to the way they were, digitally erase any sort of straps, harnesses, wires that he's attached to that would keep him from dying. But it is still very, very different than swapping out Tom Cruise with a like CGI double on a CGI plane. It's very different. I think there's something about that that's increasingly attractive to us. This is what is, all these factors together have revived attraction to Cruise as this iconic movie star, and he is a meta-modern movie star. It's not just that his stunts are thrilling. They feel like acts of defiance against apathy, against nihilism, against cutting corners. And that's refreshing. There's good reasons why that feels refreshing as well. Research in behavioral and cognitive science suggests that people experience higher existential satisfaction when they're engaged in purposeful action towards long-term goals. Those goals are shaped by the story we believe is true, which we then attempt to inhabit with our daily lives. What happened when our culture lost a shared sense of story together in the postmodern age is that it created a vacuum of meaningful goals to pursue and replaced a shared sense of story, a shared sense of pursuing these particular goals and values. It replaced that with either nihilistic despair or this intense self-authoring mechanism, this sense that I was left on my own to author my own story. There are many things that I think Cruise embodies as an actor and in the ways that he engages with the press, especially these last few years, which are commendable. He models a commitment to his craft, his willingness to risk towards goals, the pursuit of excellence. These are all traits that behavioral and cognitive scientists would highlight for us and say our brains recognize those kinds of values as vital to our well-being. So when we witness someone who is all in on their commitment to their craft, their willingness to risk towards worthwhile goals, their pursuit of excellence, we are invited to remember that meaning is something made through devotion and risk towards something good. It calls out something that seems to be hardwired into our programming. Psychologist Jonathan Haidt noted that many young people today suffer not so much from a lack of pleasure. We're certainly not devoid of dopamine hits. In fact, we are oversaturated with dopamine hits. But we suffer, and younger generations in particular, suffer from a lack of meaningful risk. Too much scrolling, too much self-monitoring, navel-gazing, too little external purpose. Too little external, outward facing goals and objectives that we give ourselves to. Cruise, by contrast, he is not detached. He is intensely, almost absurdly attached to his work, to his mission as an actor, and to the possibility that what he does actually matters. We've spent the last few decades learning how to deconstruct, but many are also starting to realize that you can't build your life, and we certainly can't build our culture out of critique alone. Something in us wants to join again in some sort of aspirational task. The recognition that maybe I am not self-authoring my story, that there is some other higher story that I give myself an alignment to, that speaks to this deep desire for meaning. It calls us to care, to act in the world. And as the new forthcoming Superman movie's tagline calls us to look up. These are signs of cultural, spiritual ache and longing. I'm not saying Cruise has it all together. Hear me out. What I'm saying is there are values, there are virtuous things that we can see in his character or persona. I don't know what he's actually like as a real person, but what we see, at least in his persona, is a kind of archetypal icon. And the values and virtues presented in that are things that we are instinctively realizing we have to recover these things if we're going to recover meaning in our own lives and rebuild and reconstruct culture. Again, I have no idea what his relationship currently is to the cult of Scientology. I am not trying to turn Tom Cruise into a saint. I'm not trying to elevate him to be some sort of cultural messiah. I'm not. I hope you hear me on this. I am pointing to him as a kind of icon, a symbolic emblem of our longing for renewal. And as the Apostle Paul once wrote, we are encouraged to hold fast to what is good. So where we see truth, goodness, and beauty in culture, we should celebrate it, hold fast to it, share it with others, and call their attention to it. Let me just say, I think it's exciting. I think that it's exciting that we are moving more in this direction of celebrating the tryhards again, celebrating earnest sincerity, even acknowledging that sincerity might be risky, but it is not foolish to risk in the direction of sincerity. It is necessary. The cold, closed hearts formed by the anti-story are starting to break apart. In its place is an invitation to rebuild, to hope, to go all in. So here's to being a tryhard again. Here is to participating in cultural renewal, where we see the true, good, and beautiful. Let's celebrate it together. I'm optimistic. We're recovering some things that maybe we've lost. We are searching for a better story. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This podcast is made possible free of advertisement because of the generous support of people over on Patreon who are doing just what you're doing. They're watching, they're listening, and they say, hey, it's great. Paul didn't try to sell me underwear or beard grooming products or anything like that. And I think that's valuable. So if you see what I'm doing is valuable, I invite you to support over on Patreon. And again, sign up for the free weekly newsletter where we're talking about stuff just like this. Hey, as always, I want to give an extra special thanks to the following supporters over on Patreon: J. Tom, Aaron, Brandon, Daniel, Dave, Eli, Jean-Marc, John Mark, Josie, Life Church, Matthew, Nick, Paul, Rob, Sam, and Scott. Thank you all for your generous support. I can't do this without you. If you want to keep this podcast afloat and the work I'm doing going, again, go over and support on Patreon. Follow that link in the description below.